Hi, I'm Alex, welcome to the channel and thanks for tuning in. So in today's video we're going to be talking about hightide stock again, and specifically addressing an issue which a couple of people have been asking me about. Now I typically wouldn't make another video covering the same stock without having a more meaningful update to give. However, given the nature of the questions, I feel this is something quite important which I need to address. I have had a number of messages from people who have invested at the all-time high or very near the all-time high and who are now quite worried about their investment. In this video, I'm going to cover my thoughts on this and a load of other really important factors about this stock. So if you're an investor in hightide or you're interested in this company, then this is definitely not one you want to miss. Now, separately to this, I have also had a load of messages from people asking me, are we in a stock market bubble? What's going to happen? Why are stocks falling at the moment? And ultimately, what am I doing with my portfolio to make sure that I'm positioned best if that is the case? Now, I have looked around on YouTube a bit and all of the videos I've seen don't address this topic particularly well. In the next 10 days or so, I will be uploading a video on this channel about this, and it's something currently in the Patreon group we're discussing and sharing thoughts about. For me though, on this topic, the most important thing is not fear-mongering. Understanding what the potential outcomes are, and how we as investors can position ourselves most optimally in those scenarios. If you're new to the channel and like investing related content, then hit that subscribe button. The YouTube algorithm doesn't like my unpredictable upload schedule, and as a result, oftentimes my videos aren't showing up on people's homepages. If you want to make sure you don't miss an upload, smash that bell button next to the subscribe button, and that should make sure they are pushed to your homepage and so you don't miss a video. The channel now also has its own Patreon community. This is quite different from other ones I've seen on YouTube. If you're interested in finding more, then check the link in the description below, and there's a video kind of giving you an overview of what you can expect. If you like the video, please smash the like button, it's so helpful in pushing the channel to a wider audience. And as always, I'm not a financial advisor, this video is purely for educational and entertainment purposes only, but let's get straight into it. Now the first thing we need to talk about here is the financial results. So on the 1st of March, hightide will be releasing its full annual results. Of course, once we know these, I'll make a dedicated video focused on exactly how these are and what these mean for us as investors. However, we know that in the meantime, the preliminary guidance is that they'll beat their estimates on a revenue basis. The magnitude of this we don't know, however the estimates for the revenues are currently around $80.6 million. We've been guided to expect a gross profit in line with the estimates. And on an EBITDA level, if it does hit the analyst estimates, that comes in at around $9.3 million. Now personally, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to this EBITDA line. It'll be interesting to see how many of the synergies from the acquisitions have been realised. And it'll also give us a good understanding of the level of cost control and control over the cost base which management has. If we see an outperformance of this EBITDA figure, that would be very, very good news. And personally, I would see that as a strong catalyst for the price in the short term. And so that should drive the share price up. On the back of this, I do expect to see higher analyst price targets and revised revisions for forecast years as well. Again, under normal market conditions, positive news like this should be reflected in an increase in the stock price. So those people that are currently worried about the stock price and who've only just recently acquired their shares, you haven't yet had one earnings release since you've acquired your shares. So wait for the news here, see how that is, and remember this is a long-term investment. That leads us quite nicely onto the second point, the fact that this is a long-term investment. This is a thesis-led investment. An investment into hightide is an investment into the belief and into the thesis that there will be a changing and a move in the legalization status of cannabis across the US, North America, and other regions of the world. Changes in the regulatory status like this don't happen overnight. When you're making investments like this, which are made on the back of a thesis, you have to be patient. It takes a while for them to play out and for the story to prove itself. This is not at all dissimilar from a number of other thesis plays that people are currently playing. For example, the legalization and regulation of online casino gaming and online sports betting across the US. The growth in the remote working space. EVs. These are thesis-led investments and they take a while to play out. Think of it this way, if you'd been one of the early investors in Tesla just shortly after the IPO, you wouldn't have seen any astronomical increases in the stock price for a number of years after that point. 2 to 3 years until you actually saw some meaningful increases in the price for Tesla. Again, that is a thesis-led investment, a belief that the EV sector will grow, that the penetration of electric vehicles will grow as a percentage of the overall vehicle market, and that that's where the overall market and landscape is shifting. Again, that's not dissimilar from what's happening here with the cannabis sector and the legalization across various states in the US, and in economies globally. In the previous video on hightide, we discussed the key reasons as to why countries and states are likely to be accelerating their thinking around this topic. And so if you haven't seen that video, then I definitely recommend going to check that out and understanding why you should be quite excited about this thesis. So if you're worried about your investment in hightide, you need to reflect on that investment thesis. Do you believe in it? If you don't believe in that thesis around the cannabis sector, then you definitely shouldn't be investing in cannabis related stocks. Now, the next point to touch on here when we're talking about long-term investing and the need for patience is the fact that you shouldn't become accustomed, you shouldn't become used to 3 to 5x to 10x baggers overnight or in very short periods of time. Yes, there's a disproportionate amount of those in the market currently. However, that's not reflective of normal market conditions whatsoever. Again, you need to understand whether those are truly sustainable or not. Of course, there's always exceptions to these rules, and in some companies this growth in the stock price is going to be sustained and they are going to be companies of the future. However, it's pretty easy to find a number of those stocks where it's not sustainable. Off the top of my head, let's look back 12 months ago when everyone was talking about all the tanker stocks. Look at their valuations when everyone was getting very excited about those then, and look at them now. So again, remember it's a thesis-led investment. Be patient. Remember the core pillars of the reason for an investment into HITID. Firstly, it's the growth. It has an unprecedented, massive growth opportunity, both within regions where cannabis is currently legalised and within states which are likely to legalise cannabis as well. This legalisation status won't change overnight, so you need to be patient. Now, the second pillar of that investment thesis into HITID is the fact that it's undervalued versus its peers. We discussed this in the previous video, showed why it is undervalued. So again, for that delta to be closed, for it not to be undervalued versus its peers, it takes time. Ultimately, HITID needs to continue performing well. The market needs to see this. And over time, that discounting valuation versus the peers will be fixed. So again, I feel like a bit of a broken record here, but the fact I'm saying that we need to be patient shouldn't be news to us. We knew this at the time when we were making the investment, and so some red days shouldn't have an impact if you believe in the overall investment thesis. Now, another thing to touch on as well, and a dedicated video on this is coming soon, is the NASDAQ uplisting. Again, that doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. However, it should, for a number of reasons which we'll discuss in that video, have an impact on the price from a positive momentum perspective. So make sure you're subscribed so when that video is uploaded, you don't miss it. Now, before we go on to the third point in this video, I just want to touch on one thing very quickly, which actually really impressed me. So following my previous video, I dropped an email to Raj Grover, the CEO, which is something I often do when I cover a stock on this channel, is email the CEO and try and see if they're open to a discussion. I know CEOs are very, very busy. I appreciate they've got much more important things on their agenda, so typically I never get a reply. However, in this case, not long after sending the email, I actually received a really lengthy, encouraging and positive response from Raj. That response was so unexpected, and it just shows his passion and dedication to the business. Unfortunately, he won't be joining us on the channel at this point in time. However, that's completely understandable given what he has on his plate. That being said, I do think it's positive to see that he's spending his time focused on delivering the strategy and the growth rather than coming on some tiny YouTube channel. So overall, this was great to see. Visionary, motivated, passionate CEOs are so important for companies like this to deliver their strategy and deliver on the massive growth opportunity they have in front of them. Again, another reminder for patience here. You don't grow a business from 9 million EBITDA to $46 million of EBITDA overnight. It takes time. It takes a dedicated management team like they have here, and it happens block by block. And as investors, we have to be prepared for that. Now, the third point I want to touch on is the fact that in the previous video, we talked about how HITID is undervalued versus its peers. And despite recent moves in the market, I still believe this is the case. My view on that is unchanged. Over the past week or so, we have seen a sell-off in a number of the weed stocks and then more broadly across the market as a whole. The sell-off across the market as a whole I'm saving for a completely different video, so ignore that dynamic for now. Here we're talking about just the sell-off in weed stocks that happened a couple of days ago. Now, this is certainly not the first time it's happened to the sector at all. If you have been invested in the sector for a while, you'll be absolutely familiar with this. Given the nature of the sector and the investor interest in it, it just is more volatile. This sell-off wasn't driven by any macro factors. There wasn't any change in the regulatory landscape. There hasn't been any change to the underlying performance of the businesses. And there's no operational explanation for that sell-off in just the weed stock part of it. And so ultimately, there is no technical or fundamental reason as to why those stocks have sold off. Now again, before people come at me, I'm talking just about the sell-off in the weed stocks before the sell-off across the rest of the market, which we've seen over the last couple of days. Again, I'll address that in a separate video in due course. I'll go into it in real detail, explain everything you need to know, and how you should make sure your portfolio is positioned so that whatever the outcome, whatever the scenario, you're in a good place. So during that sell-off, from its high point on the 9th of February, HITID's stock price fell by 30%. The company which I would view as its closest competitor, Planet 13, over the same period of time, fell by 18%. Now, there is no financial, operational, or macro reason as to why both of these share prices decreased by different amounts. If you invested in HITID, you must have believed that HITID was undervalued versus its peers. This recent decline in both the share prices just makes that gap even bigger, ultimately meaning that HITID is now even more undervalued versus its peers. Personally, I think the sell-off is unjustified. As a long-term investor, I'm not unduly concerned by this. I still believe in the long-term macro picture and the long-term prospects for the sector, so personally I remain really excited. If this had been driven by awful financials posted by HITID, or for example a massive change in the regulatory landscape, then I would be concerned. But it's not, so I'm not. For me, the thesis remains unchanged. HITID is undervalued versus its peers, and as the company grows and delivers on its great growth plan, this will become more and more apparent. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please smash the like button. If you're new to the channel and you like investing related content, then hit that subscribe button. If you're interested in something a bit different and more content of a similar nature, then check out the Patreon. And as always, please let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. I love hearing everyone's opinions, thoughts, perspectives, so please get involved. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.